Hey, welcome to the Harry Man Show number 34. I have a special guest today that, someone I watched in the 90s, early 2000s, and the good old MTV days. I air drummed to him, had a lot of respect for him. Ray Eklund, he's played in bands like Everclear, and currently playing with a band called Storm Large. How you doing, Greg?
Is this the Harry Man?
Yeah, it is.
Is this the Harry Man? Okay. And apparently this is a drum podcast. I thought this was like a support group or something.
Oh, no,
Harry
no.
Man, so.
No, that's just a drum show for now. And
Okay, cool. You know what? I guess you could be both. I guess you could be a drummer and a Harry Man.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
Well, how you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm really good, actually. I'm just waiting for this year to be over, and I got a lot of things going on, but it's good. It's all good.
As we are, this year's felt like about 4 years put together, but.
Wait, what was that?
I said this year has felt like 4 years put together, so yeah, I understand that.
Yeah, there's a sort of hunker down mentality. So it's actually, it's funny, and just to jump into it real quick, I've just come to the realization this week that a lot of the newer music that I'm doing right now, and I write constantly, so that doesn't mean any of it ever comes out or anything. Mm-hmm. But I've noticed that a lot of the stuff I'm working on, actually I am working on a song right now, but it's if there's a theme in the last month of music that I've been writing, is that it's rhythmical, but it's repetition. It's sort of monotonous repetition. Nice. And I think subconsciously that's just sort of because of this year, where everything seems to just repeat and repeat and repeat. And I will tell you that I'm wearing shoes and I'm not wearing sweats, but I'm not, I'm wearing kind of just comfortable grubby clothes. But my wife says, some days you should try to look better. But I was like, why? I don't leave the house. So
yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So this year's crazy. Let's try to move on into the next one, and
yeah, absolutely, I agree.
See where that takes us.
Well, I want to take you back a little bit before this year. Did you grow up in Virginia or Minnesota there?
Well, I was actually a Navy brat. My dad was a fighter pilot in the Navy, and so I kind of moved around a bunch. When he was actively flying, we lived out in the deserts of California where the air bases were.
Okay.
But at some point, he got offered a desk job, which he didn't want to take because he didn't get into a desk job, but it was in London.
Huh.
And so when I was 8 years old, we moved to London, and so that's where I actually started. I won't say play the drums, but I started to get interested in the drums because I saw this was 1978, but in 1981.
And that's when Led Zeppelin was kind of at their prime, right? Or went a little off there. I think Led Zeppelin was...
Oh, no. Well, the funny thing about Zeppelin, it's weird. It's because at the age of 8, we moved to England. I missed sort of all of the Americanized music that people started to listen to. So the first music I really started to listen to was when I was in England. And so I started to play drums because of Adam and the Ants. I saw them on British TV with two drummers, and I was hooked. Huh. But the first music I grew up listening to were bands like The Jam, The English Beat, The Specials, all the stuff that was going on in England. I was a huge ABBA fan too, Adam and the Ants. But that was all what was being played at Boomtown Rats. It was all being played on British radio. So, the ages of 10 to 12 is when kids really start listening to music, and so we came back from England in 1982, and I was, everyone was listening to like Van Halen and AC/DC and Led Zeppelin and all that, and they just had never been on my radar because I was overseas listening to these other things. So
that's kind of weird to think about.
To this day I can appreciate like AC/DC and Van Halen and all that stuff, but it's never been my jam. It's never been what I was interested in initially, in that initial sort of exciting formative phase of music. I was listening to other things. So so then from there we moved back. We when we left England in '82, we moved to Virginia, and we were there for 6 years, which is the longest we'd ever lived anywhere. So, and that's when I went through high school and stuff, and started playing music and getting bands together and stuff. So I would say I grew up in England, but really I got interested in music earlier when we first moved to England.
Nice. And then you said you lived in the desert part of California. What part was that?
Lemoore, California.
Oh, I didn't.
Near Fresno.
I grew up pretty close to there as well too.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah.
Okay, because most of the time I got to explain it to people. But yes, I knew it was near Fresno because Fresno is the sort of the biggest town, like the biggest city, I guess, or town, big town. So anytime we wanted to go into town, we went to Fresno, which
I grew up in the.
It wasn't a real pretty thing to see in the 70s. I don't know, maybe.
No, it's still kind of rough.
Better now. Okay. All right.
But sorry, I was just checking because I had a feeling you were in the same area when you said desert in California. But going forward, now when you jump back to the American culture in high school, were you diving into like Van Halen and over the type of bands you were playing with, or was it kind of like you still have those British roots in you?
I tried because, at the age of 12, peer pressure is a big deal. I was kind of like, I had a Scorpions record, of course, Love at First Sting or whatever. Mm-hmm. And, I tried. A lot of my friends were into Motley Crue and stuff, so I would sort of dilly-dally, but they were never my jam. Mm-hmm. They would just never, it just wasn't my thing. And then by the time, in the mid-'80s, at least in Virginia on the East Coast, there was, bands like REM and Less Active and stuff that I was more interested in. Mm-hmm. And they were American bands, but they weren't, Van Halen stuff. And so, I sort of went more, whatever we called it then, underground or progressive or whatever. I don't know. It wasn't alternative.
Non-mainstream, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just, I don't know. That's what I got into, all those kind of bands. And continued to listen to a lot of the English bands like Echo and the Bunnymen and stuff like that were coming over in the 80s.
And then, I may be jumping ahead here, but did you start singing and playing guitar around that time, or was that something that came later?
No, I came much later. I was just focused on the drums. But one of the things, probably one of the top three influencers on me as a drummer was Stuart Copeland from the Police. Like, the Police were my American stadium band.
And I can hear that in your fills too a lot, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that nobody can. I tuned, in my basement in Virginia. I had, and it's funny. Someone just sent me a text that said, "Apparently, I bought your house you grew up in England, and I was, or not in England, in Virginia, and I was a huge fan." And I go, "Oh yeah, well, down in the basement in that one corner is where I sat for hours trying to figure out how to play." I mean, I was a mimic of Stuart Copeland. I had my snare cranked. I was playing traditional grip, But the thing about Stuart Copeland is the Stuart Copeland sound doesn't translate to any other music other than the Police. You can't.
Yeah, it's got that reggae slap sound to it. Yeah.
So, but anyway, the thing that I loved about Stuart Copeland, other than that, was that he started to branch out and started to do other things. He recorded a record called in the early days of the Police called Clark Kent, which was him playing all the instruments. And then he started to break out and started to do
movie soundtracks.
Like soundtracks. Yeah, and stuff. And so it was sort of this idea of, well, wait, I can be more than just a drummer. I didn't know how, and I didn't know anything about music. And I, to this day, I still don't. But I just figured, and in the interviews I saw with him, he fled his ignorance on music too. So I was just like, well, okay, maybe I can do that. So that planted a seed that 15 years later allowed me to pick up a guitar and start doing other things. But initially, in high school, I was just focused on being the best drummer I could.
Gotcha.
Be.
And when I watch you play, you had the big toms, and you're a hard hitter. Was that necessarily from any other drummers you're watching, or that you just wanted that punk rock feel to everything?
Well, there's a thing called the '90s where everybody was trying to be as big as they could be.
Yeah.
I mean, if you draw, I have very little references. I have very little influences directly with drums, and the first one's Stuart Copeland. And then I would say you draw that line to Stephen Perkins from Jane's Addiction. They were huge for me.
Nice.
And then around the same time, then Nirvana explodes onto the scene. with Dave Grohl. Now Nirvana had been, growing up in Portland, they were, a local band from Seattle, but they always had different drummers. But one, Dave Grohl was in that position. I mean, the dude was a mother, so it was just like, oh, okay. And it was loud, big rock and roll. And you weren't going to be playing on a jazz kit. You were going to be trying to slam it. And the thing about, well, at least for me, Everclear music, it wasn't complicated on drums. So it was like, well, I'm just going to lay into it and make it fun for me, which was to sort of hit as hard as as I could, and just have a good time with it. But it was the '90s; everyone was doing that. Looking back on it now, that's what everyone was doing. And then ultimately,
people are still doing it.
Well, no, and that's great. I mean, there's a certain fun and intensity to that. But I mean, in terms of sound, it's almost better to not hit them as hard because you're not compressing them when you hit them, and everything's mic. You can just turn the mics up. It doesn't have to. You don't have to generate the volume. But you're young. You're doing stupid stuff. You're just you're sweating and you're screaming and you're banging drums and it's all good. And my older age now, that's why. And I will probably get to it. But the Storm Logic gig is perfect for me because it's not that. It's just being quiet and just supporting a vocalist. So at the end of the night, I'm not drenched in sweat. I've never even perspired at all, and it's all about trying to play simple and just get behind and support the singer. But the other thing that was so Stuart Copeland, Stephen Perkins, and then I would say Dave Grohl, but not from a Nirvana perspective,
songwriting
specifically, but the fact that he suddenly was like, "Hey, man, I can do something else too."
Yeah.
So once the Foo Fighters came out, I was like, "Whoa, okay, all right." So, a lot of my drummers are guys that actually stepped out from behind the drums and stepped to the front of the stage, and I was definitely influenced by that, with the idea that it was possible to do that.
And then, after leaving Virginia, did you go to Seattle, and that's how you hooked up with Everclear? How did that come about?
Well, actually, Everclear was from Portland, Oregon.
Oh, really?
My dad retired out of the Navy in Virginia, and my extended family was always from the Pacific Northwest, so we moved back to Portland.
I apologize for that. For some reason, Seattle popped in my head.
No, most people think that because we didn't come out of the Seattle scene, but it was Pacific Northwest.
Oh, okay.
But Everclear was from Portland, Oregon, and so I moved back there with my family, and I graduated high school, but I didn't get into any colleges I applied for, so I just kind of came back and putzed around for a couple of years, and
Now, were you responding to an ad, or was it just word of mouth for that project?
How I got into the band? It's actually a great story, but it's kind of, you almost need like cross-reference charts and all this stuff to tell it, because it's kind of a little bit crazy.
You don't have to just tell what you're comfortable with.
Well, yeah, the problem is you can't really. I've always tried to come up with a simpler way to tell it, but there's no real way to do that. But it's a great story. So, and it's a story of being literally in the right place at the right time.
Awesome.
So let's begin. Get a number 2 pencil and let's begin. What happened was that I actually in the 4 years in Portland before I joined Everclear, I'd started a band actually in Eugene when I ended up going to college in Eugene, and the band was called Jolly Mon, and we'd become a pretty big band. We were actually bigger in the Northwest than Everclear was, but Everclear was touring nationally. We were just staying around in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
So anyway, I quit that band and was sort of subbing in a bunch of bands, and ended up subbing in this band called Nero's Rome. And they were kind of a Portland band too. But they weren't. I didn't want to join them permanently. And it turns out my wife, she was my girlfriend at the time, was going to school at U of O, and she happened to live right next door to my best friend, who is still my best friend now. And I went down there one weekend. My Nero's Rome was going to play Saturday night, and I called my girlfriend out, and she's like, "Well, why don't you just come down Friday?" And I came down Friday, but she caught the flu, and so so my best friend next door said, "Well, Everclear's playing tonight. but there's this band K-Pants that's opening for them, and they're going to need a drummer, and they're really cool, so I think you should check them out. So he and I went, and that night, K-Pants opened for Everclear, which was the last night of they had just toured across from the West Coast to the East Coast and then back again, and this is in Eugene, Oregon. So this was the last show of their tour. It turns out that the sound guy that had been on tour with them, I knew, and he was sticking around to mix Nero's drums the next night in the same venue.
Uh-huh.
And he took me aside and he said, Everclear's about to get signed because they had been courted by labels in New York when they played in New York.
Oh.
And he said, they're going to be getting rid of their drummer.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, great, give me Art's telephone number. And he was a little. He goes, I can't. Art owes me money, and I don't want to help him out or something. I don't remember what the actual reason was.
Man.
But he was like, I'm not going to help Art. So I'm gonna tell you all this, but I'm not going to give you his number. So what I didn't know that night was that they had already on their way back had decided they were going to get rid of their drummer and had called somebody in Seattle to come down to check them out. So in the club that night in Eugene, Oregon, was the guy that they figured on replacing their drummer with.
Okay.
I was there trying to get the K-Pants gig on drums because I really like that band K-Pants. So I was trying to steal the drumming gig from that band.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't stealing. I think the drummer was leaving, but I was trying to get the gig for K-Pants. Mm-hmm. But so what happened then is Everclear played the show. It was a great show. K-Pants were great too, and they drove home. And they told that guy to learn their songs. The next day they jammed with him, unbeknownst to their drummer, but he didn't know any of their songs. So they just said, here's our record, go learn it, come back in a week or 2 weeks or whatever it was. So this guy went back to Seattle. In the meantime, I played that show in Nero's Room. And I remember that the woman that booked Nero's Room lived next door to Art. So this is you got to remember, kids. This is pre-cell phone, pre-internet, pre-any of that stuff.
Yeah.
If you didn't have someone's cell phone number, you couldn't get in contact with anybody.
Oh, yeah, and they'd be lucky if they picked up.
Yeah. Exactly. They had to actually be there when the phone rang.
Yeah.
And a lot of musicians in those days didn't even have answering machines because they were $1,000. I mean, it was expensive. So anyway,
that's crazy to phantom though a little bit.
Yeah. So anyway, but I knew that she had mentioned once that, I live next door to Art. So I called her up and said, hey, I had a reason to call her. I was like, what's the deal? Where's the next Nero's Room gig? What's our schedule look like? And she gave it to me, and then I said, oh, by the way, don't you live next door to Art? And she goes, yeah. And I go, you got his number? She goes, yeah. And she gave it to me. So it took me, I've always been shy, not real self-confident. So it took me a couple of days just to work up the nerve to call him.
Oh, wow.
So about, that they needed a drummer. But what I didn't know is the day I chose to call him up was the day they were going to rehearse with the Seattle drummer. Mm-hmm. And when he was packing his drums up out of the second floor from Outdoor Drum Studio or whatever, in the rain, because it was Seattle, he carrying his bass drum slipped and fell down 2 feet and broke his wrist and broke some ribs. And
wow.
When he was loading his drums to drive down to the audition.
Wow, that's crazy.
So he shows up to the audition, and Art and Craig are sitting there like, what's the deal, man? Why isn't this guy here? Again, no cell phones, no way of like, just call him. Like,
yeah.
And why they were, and then he calls from the emergency room and says, I'm sorry, guys, like an hour or two later, I'm sorry, my wrist is broken, my ribs are cracked or whatever.
Wow.
And Everclear had a tour that started in like 9 days.
Jesus.
And they didn't want to tour with their old drummer. This new guy wasn't going to work out. And it was at that moment that I called Art's number and said, you don't know me, but I'm a drummer and I hear you're looking for a drummer. And he goes, great, learn 4 songs and meet us tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
And the funny thing was, again, this is pre-iTunes, pre-any of YouTube, pre-any of this stuff.
Just loud
stereo. I had
stereo.
to drive down. I didn't have their record. So I had to drive down. There was a store in Portland called Locals Only that only sold local bands.
Uh-huh.
And I had to run down there and pick up the CD and learned 4 songs, and I showed up the next day and I played it for them, and they offered me the gig. I mean,
wow. That's like
it was only
like
because the other guy had fallen down the stairs, and it was only because they were leaving on tour in 9 days, and it was only because I was able to learn 4 songs
no, it seemed
and
like
show
the
up
stars lined
and
up
do it.
perfectly for you on that for a reason, you know.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it could have gone a million different other ways, and it didn't. It just happened to go that way.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I mean, that's actually the way things normally work when they're meant to be. I'm not sounding too sentimental, but that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and so Everclear had been together for 2 years before that. The thing that I liked about them was that, they had already they toured nationally from the get-go. Art knew that you had to go national. And every other band that I'd played in the Northwest was sort of like, well, we're just going to become really big in the Northwest, and then we'll go places.
Yeah.
But there was a real push from Art that, we got to go everywhere, and we got to sleep on floors, and we got to do that. The thing that worked out really well for me is that I happened to join 9 days before they signed the record deal. So,
oh wow, that's another thing.
yeah. So I had paid my dues with all my other bands, but by the time I was with Everclear, and we started out sharing beds and stuff, and then we'd share rooms, and eventually we got our own rooms, which was a really big day, I can tell you. Once you got your own room, you didn't have to listen to Craig snore or whatever. It was a big day, but they had already been really hitting it hard for 2 years before I joined, and then Capitol signed us, and from that moment on, we were gone like 10 months out of the year, 250 shows a year or something. I don't know.
So, what was the duration of time before you guys started kind of seeing that mainstream success? Was it a couple of years or hitting the road?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Well, what happened was they had released their own local release called "World of Noise." And when we signed with Capitol, because we didn't have a new record yet, Capitol bought the rights to that record for like 7 years. So we went out to support that record while Art was writing songs for what became Sparkle and Fade. So it was, I joined in like the late summer of '94. And I don't think we started recording Sparkle and Fade until like a year later, like the spring of '95. And then Sparkle and Fade came out in that fall. So we were touring and doing. I was with them a year before Sparkle and Fade came out, which is once Santa Monica came out, that's when things sort of exploded. But yeah, about a year and a half.
Now I want to bring up something. Was it a surreal feeling that see that happen? Because a lot of people just sit there and fantasize and dream about that. Was it like a huge feeling, or was it like an overwhelming feeling to actually see that happen?
It's kind of crazy because in some ways it is. I mean, that's the dream. You're just pushing for that. But because we were working so hard for it, there was a real belief of like, come on, we got to convince everyone. We got to just, show them that we're good and the best. And, but it was baby steps too. It wasn't like getting signed and then suddenly we were playing arenas or theaters.
It's probably a healthy process.
We got signed, still jumped into a van, and still were playing bars for the first 8 months. Driving ourselves, doing that stuff. And so each time you came through town, it was baby steps. So it wasn't as gradual of a thing as most people think, because you'd roll through Cleveland and you'd play, a bar, and the next time you played it, you'd have more people. The next time you played it, it'd be sold out. And then the next time you'd move into a bigger club or a small theater, and so by the time you get where it hits, there is a certain match to gas kind of explosion, but it doesn't. I don't know. It didn't feel like that big. It didn't feel like that big of a change.
It just sounds like you kind of grew with it. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, and from that point, then you just start getting a lot of people coming to your shows, and that's the difference. But the work, and the travel and everything else stays the same. So,
so in your travels, was there any memorable countries or venues that you kind of remembered vividly?
It's weird because you do it so much, and there's so many memories, but they're like flashes, and people come up to me and say, "I saw you in Nebraska" or whatever, and boy, it's really tough
Yeah.
sometimes to
Yeah, it's just like going to work.
stuff.
So
Yeah, yeah, but it's weird. I now in my I attribute it to this, but I have sort of motion sickness now and later.
Mhm.
Not, I think it's tied into being constantly in motion for 10 years
yeah.
of jumping on planes, up and down, jumping into a van, jumping into a radio promoter's car, being driven here, being on a bus, driving overnight while you sleep, so you're in motion while you sleep.
Uh-huh.
I think it affected me physically in that way. But I mean, there's lots of memories. There's lots of good times. There's a lot of bad times too. But for me, what was really exciting is when we went to England, because that was the first time I'd been back since I lived there.
Oh, nice.
That was pretty cool. But the bummer thing about that was that we just happened to be hitting England literally as Britpop became the biggest thing in the world. So no one wanted, and it was a celebration of Englishness and English bands, and they didn't want to know anything about a three-piece band from the Northwest.
You're talking like Spice Girls, like kind of era is what you're saying?
Spice Girls was the popular side of it, but bands like Oasis and Blur.
Oh, gotcha.
And what was the other one?
I have a feel for what you're saying. I remember that kind of VH1 style.
Yeah. Well, the thing was is that England had a huge music revival in the 80s, right? It was kind of a hot thing, right? But then in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, it kind of fell apart, and they got on to, Nirvana was huge there. Like, Nirvana is just massive.
Huh.
And so they kind of were all tired out from the grunge thing or whatever with Nirvana after the early to mid 90s. And then Britpop happened, and it was a real celebration of we can be English again and sing about English things. And for me, I loved it because having grown up there, I don't know, I felt a kinship with it. Maybe I understood it better, but they didn't want to know about American rock bands or rock bands in general. And so because of that, we were lumped into, we played like Castle Donington with like Kiss and Ozzy. we were a rock band, to them.
Yeah.
We played Castle
fireworks, big
noises. Yeah, like rock, and we were in Kerrang over there, and we were in all these like heavy metal magazines and stuff because there wasn't a place to put us because the mainstream music magazines were all about Blur and Oasis and
that's crazy to think about that.
Elastica.
Now,
and so I loved to go back there to tour, and it was great, but we never were able to get to a level really of success there that we did to other places because it was so British centric at that time. But when we went to Australia, we were huge in Australia, so because they like American rock bands in Australia.
That's crazy. It's just a paradigm shift at all different times. It's weird.
Yeah, it moves constantly. And so, if you're trying to start a band and trying to tie into the latest sound or, whatever tip, man, it's tough to do. It's because it changes constantly. Well, this is in the old days. Nowadays, I don't even know what's happening.
Well, there's so many different outlets now, and there's so many different, it's hard to even grasp what's even going on right now. But back one thing I want to shift gears on, did you start playing DW drums before Everclear, or was that something you kind of jumped on while you were in that band?
I wish I was playing DW drums before Everclear. I mean, DW drums were like, man, if I could only get a DW kit, that would just be amazing.
Yeah, I know that
feeling. Anybody was playing them, and the guys that used to play the Yamaha Customs were now playing DWs, and I was just like, oh, but DWs are expensive. So I was just like, if I could only, I was playing a Pearl Export, I was like, if I could only get a DW kit, but there was no way I could cough up $3,000 or whatever at the time to do it.
Well, now they're like $6,000 or $7,000 for a 4-piece.
That might be, but so when Everclear signed with Capcom, they gave us money to buy instruments and stuff. That was a big day for me. I went to a local store, the only store in Portland that actually carried them because no one could afford them.
Wow.
And bought a DW kit. And I tell you what, at that time we were writing and rehearsing for Sparkle and Fade in Art's basement, and it was for the first time ever I could tune drums.
Yeah.
because the shells were so responsive. I could actually, I heard, oh, you do each slug and try to tune them, uniform and all. A Pearl Export kit with pinhead stripes, pinstripes
It's pretty flat.
that have been beat to shit. You're not going to respond to that, So suddenly with DW shells, I could hear the wah, 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 or something was out. And I was like, whoa, this is incredible, this is a big deal.
Yeah.
And we all had new gear, everybody bought a guitar that they liked or amp that they liked. And so I had my DW, so that was a big deal.
Now, did you play?
I still have those. Unfortunately, when I lived in San Francisco, I only had one drum set, so those were the drums, and the bass drum was stolen out of a rehearsal area. But I still do have the snare drum and the tom and the floor tom from it. But that was DW kits, and I was the only guy locally or anywhere that had DW kits that I knew of. So other drummers wanted to come see them. Can we come over and look at your DW? Yeah.
Oh wow, sure. That's a trippy thought. Was that the Silver Sparkle one?
It was a Silver Sparkle. It was white marine.
Oh, nice.
But it wasn't ultra white marine, although they faded to ultra white marine. But
yellow, yeah.
At the time, it was white marine, which was more of like a gray marine color. But it was a big deal. So then after that, when you start to become famous or recognized, DW wanted to. I wanted some bigger drums because the original kit were pretty small, pretty standard, and so DW made me the Silver Sparkle one, the bigger drums and stuff. Although I ultimately ended up using the smaller of the two tom options, I think. But yeah.
And that had a 16/18 floor tom right on it. I think that's what I remember seeing.
Okay, this is where it gets nerdy.
You're talking to a guy that used to read through every magazine and like to memorize people's sizes and stuff. So it's not that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was never interested in that stuff. So people are like, "Is that a 14?" I don't know. I hit it and then boom, and I went, "Yeah, okay."
It's smaller than that one.
But I think actually, if I think about it, even though I only played a 4-piece kit, they gave me 5 pieces. So one tom I think was the standard 14, and then the other tom was a 15 maybe.
Yeah, it's probably 14 and 16.
And the bass drum, the bass drum was 24. I know that because it seems huge at the time.
Uh-huh.
And the floor tom, I've never had 18-inch floor tom, so it would have been 16. So I think it was 15 and 16.
Oh, nice.
On that, yeah, and a 24-inch kick, which was a pretty shallow kick, 24 by maybe 14, maybe.
It sounds like a 14.
Is it the standard of 16?
Standard's 18. Standard's 18, so 16 and 14 are the other two smaller sizes.
I think it was a 14 because it seemed abnormally shallow.
Oh, that's pretty cool. That's the Bono kind of sound.
I guess so. Again, but Bono was not my guy. So,
yeah. Are you still playing DW drums, or you kind of? Because I noticed you were kind of going more into like the vintage style. Is that something you went into later?
Yeah, I still have then later in the last couple of years of Everclear, when I had even a bigger kit in terms of more stuff, I got a copper sparkle CW kit, and I still have those.
Oh, nice.
But and they're great kits. It's funny that I ended up having almost 3 DW kits, and actually I did an ad campaign for them for their Pacific drums. Have you ever heard of Pacific drums?
I have about 6 or 7 Pacific kits upstairs. So yeah,
do you? Okay.
I collect DW drums myself, so I have about 5 or 6 up there as well.
Oh, okay. Wow. So yeah. All right. So then this is your jam. But they gave me a Pacific kit, the top of the line one. I don't know which one it was.
It's probably the CX Maple at the time, or the LX.
I think so. Yeah, whatever you said. And that was a great kit. As a matter of fact, I did the ad campaign, and they were like, "We'd like to give you a kit." And who's going to say no? Like, I was like, "Yeah, sure." But I ended up using that kit. I think on most of the Oohla records, and ultimately I sold it to some guy. But but only because I just had too many kids. I was just like,
Yeah.
To this day, I try to tell my wife maybe I should sell one of those DWs just to get room, and she's like, you can't. Those are your Everclear kids.
Yeah.
That's the legacy for your boys. And I'm like, but my boys aren't interested in any of this, so they're not going to care one way or the other.
Huh.
Yeah. So, but I've held on to them. They're the DW kids. But they were mostly live. I didn't use the two sparkles for any studio. Well, that's not true. The very last episode record, I used the copper sparkle. But
now, pulling in what you're doing, and I want to talk about what you're doing currently. The Oohlas and the Storm Large. When did that start about, or the Storm Large stuff?
Well, we should probably go in order. So there's probably the Oohlas.
I apologize.
No. I mean, just because it's easier to tell. But when I left Everclear, I was so completely burnt out of everything, of all of it, that I kind of walked away from drums. Even I didn't want to do drums anymore. And around that time, I started to write music, and I said, I'm just going to maybe see if I can write songs. I've always been in bands with guys that can write songs, so let me see if I can do it. But someone taught me how to play a bar chord on a guitar, and so I started to write songs. And my brother at the time lived in Los Angeles near me, and his girlfriend at the time was a singer, and we just sort of started the Oohlas, and my main focus was to not do the drums. I just wanted to play guitar and record and write, and that's what happened. That sort of saved me, and it made music fun again, because I was really completely shattered of
you probably lived 4 or 5 lifetimes in that decade compared to most people. You know what I mean? So I can understand.
Yeah, and the way it ended, it just was like it just left this sour taste in my mouth. So suddenly I was like, I want to learn something else.
Yeah,
and I started to play guitar and write songs, and it was like a whole new experience of trying to figure out how amps work, and where do I plug this chord into, and what does this pedal do, and it's. To this day, I don't know the names of the strings on the guitar. I don't know how to play chords properly. But someone just showed me how to do a bar chord, and so I just used that to write. And it made music fun for me again. It was like, wow, this is amazing. Ultimately, I did play drums on the record because I just couldn't find someone to do it, and all of my friends were like pro guys, and no one was around. They were always on tour, and finally, it was just easier for me to just jump behind, and the songs are not complicated, so it was just like boom, 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 done it. But then when we were touring and stuff, it made all of that fun again, because it was about, we bought a van, and we humped our own gear, and we got our 2 drink tickets a night, and and we played in, got $20 to play some bar in Albuquerque or whatever, but it made all of it fun again, and that was really important for me. So from that point on, I've been writing and recording forever. And then the Storm Large gig came because I'd known her for quite a long time. She's an amazing vocalist, and she had moved to Portland, and I was still living in LA. And she'd been on a TV show, Rockstar TV show, Sleeping Over or something.
Oh, are you talking about the Tommy Lee thing?
Yeah, she was one of the singers on that.
Oh wow! Okay.
But she's been singing for a long time. But she jumped on that show. She actually was like, I don't want to win it, because I don't want to be in Tommy Lee's band. I just want to use it as publicity.
Yeah.
And so when that ended, she'd had a little mashup band in Portland that would play mashed up songs or whatever they call it. But anyway, she was putting together, and that all fell apart. She was putting together a new band. She's like, I want you involved. And I was like, well, I don't even live in the same city as you. And she was like, that's all right. I'll just start flying you up for gigs. And I go, well, what about rehearsals? And she goes, we're not going to rehearse, so don't worry about that. So, and that was it. In the 9 years I played with her, we've had like 3 actual rehearsals where we've actually tried to get together. It's mostly done live and sound checks. So, but she saved me because the Oohlas saved me because I'd quit Everclear and was with the Oohlas, and we recorded that record ourselves. We recorded it in my garage. I played almost all the records on it. Ollie played some guitar and some sound effects and stuff, and my brother played bass, and we did it all ourselves. Like, and that's what was fun about it.
Yeah, that's cool. The organic feel to it.
Yeah, and then when that sort of ran its course, I was just sitting there going, "Wow, well, now what do I do?" Like, I'm high school educated, no real life skills, and Storm came along and plucked me up. And the great thing about her is, at the time we would play supper clubs and cabaret bars, and kind of a weird mix of stuff. But
nice.
She grew as well, so we play theaters and play with symphony orchestras now, and play the Kennedy Center in DC, and
No, I'm blinking out, but I'm gonna get mad at myself later. But the clown that does the covers, do you guys do stuff with him as well?
Yeah, he's a friend of Storm, so every once in a while.
What was his name again? I apologize.
Puddles.
That's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah, Puddles the clown. He's a cabaret singer. He's been friends with Storm. He sang one of the songs on her record that we did, and if he's in town, the same town, he usually comes by, or she goes by, and they'll sing together or whatever. And the two of them, they're both amazing singers.
Yes, they
both
are.
Amazing show people. So it's fun to see what they come up with and how they play off each other and all of that. So
now, going forward, not with the obvious, when do you guys think you guys are going to go back out?
Yeah, that's kind of crazy. I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of a broad question, but I mean, everyone's saying next summer, but that's what everyone's kind of hoping for. But do you guys have any plans?
No, I mean, the funny thing is that the very last show that I played with her was actually here in Minneapolis. It was the last show of our tour, and we had sort of all agreed that we would just take like 3 months off or something. And we didn't realize, of course, that a month later COVID was going to hit and shut everything down forever. But the thing about her is, because we play sort of these concert halls and stuff, she usually books a year out. So even if it was the vaccines made everybody great by April, I don't know what that would mean. It's not like
culturally it's going to be a little off too, a little bit. So you know what I mean. The hype won't really.
Yeah, and then not only that, but all these concert halls, I'm sure, had to get rid of their people. So now you got to round up everybody. I don't know how it all comes together. If we could be doing it by summer next year, that would be, I think, the best case scenario. But right now, there's nothing on the table, and her management company books people like Yo-Yo Ma and stuff, and like major players, and none of them are working. So I don't even know if the company exists anymore in terms of there's been no revenue generated. So
I have a bad habit of asking that question. So I apologize. So I guess it's just like the hope, like getting excited to go back out and see live music again.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it's all about. But I really don't know.
Yeah.
I don't, and not only that, but it really is going to require something like a vaccine where you make it safe, where you don't have to wonder if every flight you take or whatever hotel you're staying in. I don't know, man. It's going to be really interesting to see at some point how this all fires up again, because it's literally just, like a train stop, just everything, and even locally, like I had a solo record coming out, and it's like I put a band together. We rehearsed once, and the next week they shut our state down.
What was the name of that band?
Well, it's my solo record. It's just my name. It's just a bunch of guys I knew here in town. But the thing is that, and the record's at the vinyl pressing plant now. But it's like, how are you going to promote it? You can't play shows, and not only that, but you just wait, because I don't know if the bars and clubs in this town are going to be there when this lifts, because they all have mortgages and everything to pay.
Yeah, it's pretty rough.
I don't know what's going to be available to play out when next year, if that happens by the summer or fall. I mean, I don't know what's going to be around. Crazy time, totally crazy time. And so I have a solo record. I'm like trying to promote to no promotion. Like, it's like, there's nothing to do. There's no places you can play and all that stuff.
Well, is that released anywhere that I could plug for you on your solo stuff?
Oh yeah, well, it's in the vinyl plant now. I'm pressing on vinyl. It'll be digital as well. I'm not doing CDs or anything, but yeah, it'll. Right now, they're saying it'll be out, or they'll have it back to me by March. The other thing is COVID slowed all the processing stuff down, or all the manufacturing down.
Oh, nice. Oh, not nice, not
So,
nice.
right,
But I mean, is there a website, or we could check out Storm Large as well too? What would be the best place to push people?
Well, Storm Large's site, it's I think stormlarge.com. And mine right now, it's just a sort of a coming soon page, but it's he's just the drummer.com. And when I get, well, yeah, that's a moniker I've had for a while, and it's actually been a bit of a motto for me because
that's pretty cool.
I was in an interview with a band that shall remain nameless, where the interview said, "Well, now we're going to ask Greg a question," and the certain lead singer was like, "Why would you ask him the question? He's just a drummer." And I was like, okay, that's the new motto right there. And so that's going to be. I named my record company that's releasing my record. I'm also doing I'm doing a documentary on a polka drummer right now. So if that documentary ever comes out, it'll be on the He's Just the Drummer Productions.
Oh, that's cool.
So yeah, so that's and actually I'm getting shirts designed and everything with the logo on it. So anyway, but it'll all come through he'sjustthedrummer.com when it actually happens. It's nothing but a coming soon page right now because I'm just trying to set everything up so it's ready for the release of the record when it comes out.
Well, I'll definitely help you spread the word. That's definitely stuff I want to check out and listen to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, I'll send you an advance copy so you can be one.
I'll happily pay for one.
Well, I'll let you buy the vinyl if you like the advance. But the thing about the solo record for me was that it's actually, the funny thing is, it's actually about leaving. How do I say this? When I started to write songs again after the Oohlas, and I write songs weirdly. I don't write them and then record them. I sort of write and record at the same time. Mm-hmm. So that's just the way I do it, which is weird, I guess. But yeah. So basically, when I started to write a bunch of songs, not knowing, we had moved to Omaha, and my wife had a job, so kids were in school, so I had the house to myself all day. And I started to write songs, and once they started to get more into a finished state, I started to realize they basically told a story. And the story starts with me leaving a band, a successful band, and trying to come home and adjust to like normal life, like being the dad and being the father and being normal again. And so these songs, basically, I realized I didn't try to write a concept record. I hate concept records. I think they're just pretentious. But the songs, I realized if I put them in a certain order, sort of told that story. And so it's weird. It's a super personal record to me. I don't expect anyone to like it or care or anything, but I figured I have to release it in order to move on to the next creative project. And I had always wanted to put out a solo record, and I'd always wanted to put out a solo record on vinyl.
Nice.
So, because I always collect vinyl and stuff. So
same here.
That's what was happening, but it took many years to do because I was calling in favors because I had no money on it at all. Mm-hmm. And but it finally got finished. So I'm really proud of it. I always said that the Oohlas was the thing I was most proud of, even more so than Everclear. And I don't know. Right now, I'm really proud of this record. So,
all right. Well, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's cool. It's not a record that has like radio hits or any of that kind of stuff on it. It's just a true story. And what record has radio hits anymore?
Yeah, and any radio hits, I really can't even name a radio hit right now, to be honest with you.
I'll tell you what. Can you name a radio station?
There's just one because I've listened to it for like the last 20 years, but that's really about it. In Phoenix.
Which one? In Phoenix, which one?
98 KUPD.
Okay.
You're on it. Obviously, your songs are on it, but like that's pretty much the only one here that I ever kind of tap into because I have local friends that get on it once in a while.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is that that's all gone away. Like the idea, the whole reason why there were labels, they were basically loan sharks. But the one thing that they gave you was access to radio stations, and radio stations gave your music access to people, and that's different now. Anybody can access your stuff anywhere now.
Yeah, and
But
like we were talking about earlier, YouTube is kind of where I go check out bands, and it links me to this and that. So that's usually kind of where everyone kind of falls now. Spotify, it's a big one.
Right, but there's none of the trade-off is you can have access to anything.
Yeah.
The trade-off for that for the artist is that none of those things are monetized, so you can't make enough money off of those things to live.
Yeah.
As I understand it, and I'm the old fogey, that's like, get off my lawn. So,
well, I think it's done damage to our attention spans too, because it makes everything so like accessible and fast. That's the way I see it.
Yeah.
And that I see destructive, but good at the same time, just like you're saying. So there's highs and lows to it.
Oh, I mean, one of the greatest tools for me is like the what is it, Apple Music or whatever, where I can access anything, immediately. But one of the things, I don't know, one of the reasons why I like vinyl is that you have to commit at least 22 minutes to it. You know what I mean? Like, and so you have to sit down. I mean, no, you don't. You can jump up if you want, but if I'm going to listen to vinyl, I'm going to actually put it on and lay on the couch and look at the liner notes. And I'm not even going to commit to 44 minutes of both sides. I'm just 22 minutes is hard enough to commit to.
Yeah.
But what I find is whenever I listen to vinyl, I tend to think about it, like throughout the day or the next day or whatever. Whereas if it's just music that I have on in the car, and it may be one of my favorite bands, I don't think about it. It's just there. But vinyl forces like you just said, your attention span. And so I do like to listen to that. But because of that, I don't have a lot of time to do that. So it's very rare that I actually get to do that. But, I don't know. And I'm talking to new people that just start railing off new people, young kids that rail off their favorite artists and stuff. That's great. But I don't listen to a lot of music, considering I consider myself a musician. There's just a handful of bands that inspire me, and a lot of those bands are old. They're not older, but they're not necessarily the newest band now. So.
Yeah. Well, Greg, I think we should have you on after you release your solo album. That'd be great to have you on again.
Hey, I would love to. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah,
that would be actually quite thrilling and weird at the same time. But yeah.
So I just want to say thanks for coming on today. I mean, I know it was a little bit of a short notice. You have some stuff to do, but yeah, it's really cool. It's really cool to talk to someone I looked up to years ago and still now. But thank you very much.
Hey, I appreciate it. But let me tell you one thing, because you said you were used to air drums to the tin. Just make sure you're limbering up and you got good form.
Plenty of water.
I had a rotator cuff problem earlier this year, and
oh really?
And the physical therapist was like, it didn't require surgery or anything, but they were like, well, what do you lift things? And I'm like, no. And they're like, do you do what? And then, no. What do you think it could be? I was like, 20 years of playing heavy, hard drums, and they're like, yeah, maybe, okay.
Oh wow, that's pretty funny.
I've been really lucky too, because I was self-taught, but sorry, we're probably going way too long. But self-taught
no, it's fine.
On drum set, but I did study in high school. I happened to have one of the best percussion teachers in the world, and he at least taught me, which I promptly forgot everything he taught me, except the one thing he did was how to hold a stick and how to move your wrist and how to have the stick react and not be tight and I think I've played thousands of shows and been around the world and pounded on drums, and the only injury I've ever had was this rotator cuff that developed 20 years later.
Huh.
So 25 years later, I never had problems with my hands, never had problems, and I never warmed up before shows. Like I know guys that have their practice pads and stuff backstage, and that I just, as a matter of fact, my drum tech knew not to wake me up until 30 seconds before we were on stage.
Oh wow!
So,
And you had your cymbals pretty high too, so that probably didn't help your shoulders as well.
Pretty high, except that when I look at bands now, they seem even way higher than mine. I tried to keep everything sort of in an impact zone.
Well, even Buddy Rich would say, "Don't ever have them higher than your shoulders." That was always kind of my rule.
Yeah, and I don't know what. I don't know. I just, because I have known guys that have required hand surgeries and wrist surgeries and whatever, shoulder surgeries. I was just really lucky that that never happened until pretty recently. But and hearing loss. Oh yeah, I have that too. Oh, yeah. But I'm 50, so I'm expected to have that.
I'm already wearing hearing aids at 33. So.
yeah. And the weird thing is that it's actually gotten worse just in the last month.
Yeah.
Like it's not even, and I hardly play drums anymore now. Like I hardly play at all. And recordings I do, I play drums on, but they're pretty. My wife's always like, "You play the most boring drums on your record." And I was like, "Yeah, that's just, I don't know. That's not the time to be." My songs don't require a, "Hey, look at me, I'm doing a tratum, a ratum, a flatum." Like that doesn't. Yeah, and and I've never been fired from a gig, but I've never played more than 2/4 and 6/8. Like it's basic. It's you can be and I was never interested in the kind of music that was required really choppy, flashy drums. I was just more always into the song. So 99.9% of the time it was going to be 4/4 or 6/8, and even if we got real jazzy, it would be 6/8. But
I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit. You're great at what you do. So.
Well, I appreciate that, but I was every song that Art wrote was going to be in 4/4 time. Actually, the only Everclear Waltz is a song I wrote, and that's the only other song in the band's repertoire that Art didn't write, and that's the Honeymoon song, and that's a waltz.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
go through and listen to that again.
Yeah, it's a ukulele song. It's not a very Everclear sounding song at all, but and it was just a little ditty I wrote for my wife that Art heard one day and was like, "Hey, we should put that on the next record." So I was like, "Sure," but it's the only Everclear waltz. But yeah, I don't play very complicated drums, and because of that, I like to vary the drums up, play more vintage type stuff, just because they sound weird and cool, and because I'm not slamming them hard. I don't, if I was to go, if I was to go out and do like a heavy rock thing now, which boy, I don't even know if I could physically do that. But I would dust off the DWs and take them out. But most of the time, I'm at home. I've got funky drums and weird things happening that I like. In my old age, I like things to be not so clean and a little bit dirtier and more buzz and vibrations and stuff. So
the dynamics, pretty much overall.
Yeah, I just think I don't know if it's an age thing. It's a simple thing to say. I just figure at a certain point, for me anyway, I just none of it matters anymore. And to get the most pristine drum sound with 18 mics, like I only have 4 mics on my kit, so that's good enough for me.
Your ego's not riding on it as much anymore, is what you're saying.
Well, the thing is that with radio and MTV, there was a level. You couldn't get a video on MTV unless it was $1 million video, cost-wise, just because of the way it had to look.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you couldn't get a song on radio unless it sounded a certain way. So you couldn't say, "Well, I'm just going to do this and record my drum set with 1 mic." It wasn't going to fly. K-Rock wasn't going to play it.
Yeah.
Not because of your 1 drum mic. I've never had someone in my entire history come up and go, "Hey, that was a pretty good show, but your tom-tom sounded a little funky." Like no one has ever said that.
Yeah.
It's not about that. It's about projecting and the experience of it. And if you listen to Everclear live shows, board tapes or any live show, we were pretty horrible. But the people that were there, from a musicmanship standpoint, But the people that were there remember it because they're hearing it blasted out through these speakers, and it was the night that they broke up with their girlfriend or met their girlfriend, or
Which is bombastic sounds, just coming at them.
Yeah, listen, volume hides a lot of things.
So the cymbals.
Yeah. And that's why when you listen to board tapes or something, it's always like, oh my God, that's horrible. But they're not seeing that Craig is jumping 6 feet off his bass amp, or the art's running around the stage or whatever. So I don't know. It's not that important to me. Sound is not that important to me, which allows me to create and write my own stuff, because I am not going to sit there for 3 days and try to get a snare sound. I'm not going to do it.
I know that punishment. I know that pain, and it sucks.
Yeah, honestly, and I have 4 mics on my drum kit now. That's one more mic than any Little Richard song from the '50s had. So it's like, come on, I don't know what it is, but because I don't have to write. If I was trying to write a song for Billie Eilish or something, then you have to have it to a certain degree, and it all has to be digital, and it all has to be.
Yeah, you're just sampling at that point. I mean,
yeah, it has to be so squeaky clean your teeth hurt. I'm not that guy.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of guys that do that. I'm just creating. For me, music has become more of art. It's art.
Yes.
Like, I'm doing a documentary. It's the same thing to me. I've started to paint. That's the same thing to me. Playing guitar is the same thing to me. Playing drums is the same thing to me. It's about the creative spirit, and if you the great freedom in realizing that you can't compete on a commercial level. And what does that even mean anymore nowadays? But
I honestly don't know.
Once you give that up, it's really freeing to be just creative.
Yeah,
and you can do anything you want.
And if people like it, people like it. That's kind of the numbers show now. So that's kind of the cool thing about it.
Oh yeah, the minute I'm pressing my record on vinyl, and people are like, "Well, how many do you think you sell?" And I'm like, I have no idea. I'm pressing 300. And I have a feeling I'll probably have 15 boxes of vinyl in my basement for the rest of my life. I just don't think that anybody's going to buy it. But the thing is that once you give up that, that concern of commerciality, it's really liberating. And I think people can do very interesting stuff. But you got to give up the idea that you'll ever make any money at it. And if you can break even somehow, that's more successful than doing it in the whole. But if you're a true creative person, you're going to keep being creative no matter what.
Yeah, you got to stop feeding the machine, man.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that I'm actually really excited. I'm 50 right now, and I'm actually really excited by all this stuff that I'm doing. That literally, it brings me no money. Yeah. I mean, there's no money at all. It costs me money, but as an artist, it's very freeing and liberating and exciting, because I'm really excited by what I do now. And it's not necessarily on the drums. As a matter of fact, I tried to play drums the other day, and I was like, holy, wow, you really slipped. Like, I was trying to do basic stuff, and I was like, whoa, okay. And it made me realize I don't play the drums very much.
Yeah.
And
the drums are like an exercise. It's muscle memory, and if the muscle's tired, it's not going to go right away.
Yeah, but I'm also not interested in trying to be the best drummer I could be anymore. I'm moved on to other interests. Oh, sorry. See, I told you I talk too much. This is going on way too much. Cut all this out if you want.
No,
just this summer I took up fly fishing, and I'm obsessed with fly fishing now. Like,
nice.
Like, yeah, it's nothing to do with music, but I'm like, I'm spending more time doing that right now than I am playing drums, for sure.
Nice. Well, like I said, we're going to have you on the show after you get your stuff released, and that way I can help you push it and show it to the more people for you. That
would be amazing.
All right. But right now, check out Greg's band Storm Large, and you said you guys are on YouTube and you have a website as well, correct?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm just the drummer. Storm Large is the person. It's her thing. But I've been with her for 9 years, so that's actually her name.
Gotcha. I messed up that. Okay, so yeah. Check out.
So I'm her drummer. It's her thing. But she treats us all like family. So
nice.
It's the way to go. But stormlarge.com. But I mean, I don't even know what she's promoting or doing anything, because there's nothing to be had. But if you actually, I'll tell you what. want to see what I do with her now, and you can see how the gig is perfect for a man in his old age. Search YouTube Storm Large Under My Skin.
Okay.
Which is an old classic song that she has rewritten and changed, and it's a professionally recorded version. So a lot of times, if you search her name, it's all like cell phone footage that's all terrible. But that one's really good. Storm Large Under My Skin, and you can see how different what I do now with her from the days of bashing away on 24-inch bass drums and stuff. So.
All right.
Actually, to me now, I actually collect old bass drums, and actually 24-inch now to me is very small.
Yeah,
I have a bunch.
I have a couple 26s up there that are a whole different world when you hit them.
Yeah, I collect now big old bass drums, like 28s, like big old parade drums if they have graphics and stuff on them. I collect those, but I'm a collector that likes to use the things I collect. I don't just collect them to if they don't work or something, that's not as interesting to me.
Yeah.
So I have a bunch of like 28s with really great graphics and stuff. So it's another passion. I got a lot of passion.
Yeah, we'll touch base on that stuff next time. But once again, thanks, Drake.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
And you guys have a good one. And please check out the show and share with your friends. Let me tell you guys about the stuff called Groove Juice. The stuff is amazing. I've been using it since honestly I can remember. It's kept my drums and cymbals looking pristine for shows or just simply practicing at home. Most drummers and some of the great drum techs around the world use this stuff and proudly endorse it. Please reach out to your local retailer or order online with Groove Juice.